Charles Oliveira has the most exciting UFC fight history with lots of disappointments, but also the most interesting redemption arc. However, when he first set foot on the UFC octagon, he was already undefeated with 12 wins, which meant he had huge hype and potential as a 20-year-old fighter with no losses. His first fight against 26-year-old Darren Elkins easily showed that his hype was absolutely real by submitting the guy after getting taken down, which just happened in 40 seconds of the very first round. Exactly 1 month and a half later, his second fight didn't disappoint the fans as well, because this was the time when Charles Oliveira showed his decent Muay Thai skills and lots of low kicks, which helped him dominate the opponent for the 3 whole rounds. But he still needed to show his main weapon, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and as a result, ended up submitting the guy in the 3rd round when nobody was expecting. Therefore, everyone knew that he would dominate the lightweight division for the rest of his career. However, little did they know that after this fight, a disaster would strike. A few months after that fight, Charles was paired against Jim Miller at UFC 124, where the first round was completely taken on the ground to submit Jim. However, in the middle of the first round, Jim Miller went for a leg lock and submitted him after twisting his ankle. He lost not because he was weak, but because he was reckless while being aggressive. That's why fans knew he would rise again. Therefore, he continued complete domination in his next fight against Nick Lentz, but something unexpected happened in the second round. Oliveira effortlessly choked Nick and made him tap, but the whole audience was booing him. Nobody was happy that he won that fight, because it turned out that before he submitted his opponent, he had landed an illegal knee where the referee didn't stop the fight. Later, this fight was marked as no contest, but fans were pissed at Charles Oliveira that he continued fighting after landing an illegal knee. This took quite a toll on Oliveira's mindset and ended up getting knocked out in the first round of his next fight. Despite winning his next 2 fights with submissions, his recklessness got him knocked out again in the first round by Cub Swanson, which was followed by a unanimous decision loss. This is the time when his hype train died and people started doubting his abilities as a real fighter, thinking that his previous wins were just luck. Therefore, Charles Oliveira had no choice but to prove his abilities once again by winning his next 3 fights in the same year. He also got a rematch against Nick Lentz and submitted him once more, but this time without breaking any rules. When it seemed like he was winning the hearts of his fans back, another disaster struck against Max Holloway in August 2015. At first, it seemed like a chaotic fight, but after 2 minutes in the first round, Charles Oliveira walked out of the fight after attempting a takedown on Max. It seemed that he injured his shoulder when going for a takedown, and therefore a referee had to step in to stop the fight. This loss was a big hit to Charles because when the fans were expecting an all-out war, they were disappointed by how Oliveira quit in the first half of the first round. That's why people started to call him a quitter and assumed that he had no talent at all. After this disappointing fight, he was submitted twice and then knocked out by Paul Felder. From 2015 to 2017, Charles Oliveira had lost 4 fights and won 3, which isn't something that a fighter with huge potential and hype does. At least that's what every fan thought. At that time, Charles Oliveira was struggling with finances and needed to somehow provide for his newborn daughter. Therefore, he had no choice but to start training like a monster to become a superstar and finally make big bucks. After repeatedly missing weight early in his career, that was the time when Charles made a permanent move to the lightweight division, which better suited his frame and energy levels. In June 2018, Oliveira made a huge comeback from his recent loss by submitting Clay Guida right in the first round. This fight showcased his calculated but even more aggressive attack style. But this time, he was no longer the reckless fighter he used to be, which led to his submission victory over Christos Giagos. Following that, Charles Oliveira used a beautifully executed technique to take down and submit Jim Miller, his former opponent, which wouldn't have been possible without his newfound calculated attacks. As Charles began dominating the lightweight division again, he was matched up with his former rival, whom he had fought twice before. Their first fight had been marked as a no contest due to Charles's recklessness. After dominating the first round, another unexpected thing happened. Charles delivered another illegal kick against Nick Lentz, but this time the referee noticed it and gave a warning during a brief timeout. However, the warning didn't help Nick, as Charles knocked him out mercilessly just seconds after the timeout. Charles continued to prove his worth and refined fighting style by knocking out and submitting 2 more opponents before facing the legend of the lightweight division, El Kukui. This was a dangerous fight for Oliveira. Despite dominating the first round, he suffered a nasty cut near his eye, forcing the referee to step in and check the injury. Despite the pain and fear Charles Oliveira was feeling from that cut, he knew that he needed to continue fighting for his daughter and family, and that's why he got back up and utterly destroyed Tony Ferguson in the remaining rounds. So after this fight, Charles was no longer seen as the quitter and finally earned the UFC world title fight he had long deserved. After 8 consecutive wins in UFC, Charles Oliveira got a title fight against Michael Chandler in May 2021 at UFC 262. This title fight was an all-out war, with both fighters brutally going for a knockout. However, in the first round, Chandler easily overwhelmed Charles with his explosive power, leaving everyone thinking Oliveira was finished. But after somehow surviving the first round, Charles Charles Oliveira remembered his mission to become a champion for his family, so he knocked down Chandler with a beautiful left hook and continued pounding until the referee stopped the fight. Following this huge victory, Bronx still needed to prove himself by defending the belt at least once. Later that year, he faced Dustin Poirier in another brutal fight. The first round was particularly intense, with both fighters engaging in aggressive striking without wrestling. But in the second and third rounds, Charles utilized his best weapon, his submission skills, and finished the fight with his signature move. After defending the belt, he became the true king of the lightweight division, almost a boogeyman figure. During this time, his style was even more aggressive than before. Therefore, he defended his throne once again against Justin Gaethje in the first round by knocking Gaethje down and choking him out. No fighter could sustain such aggression without possessing some extraordinary endurance. Unfortunately, his third title defense wasn't about endurance alone. He faced a highly skilled Dagestani fighter trained by Khabib, who was more patient and calculated than most opponents. After the first round of wrestling, Islam Makhachev overcame Charles Oliveira's aggressive style with patience and precision, ultimately securing a submission victory over the champion. After losing the belt, Charles Oliveira made a stunning comeback by completely dismantling Beneil Dariush in the first round. Even from the bottom position, Oliveira showed his dominance. Once he got back on his feet, he landed a head kick that dropped Dariush and followed up with relentless ground and pound until the referee stopped the fight. This victory reminded everyone that Charles was still one of the top lightweights in the world. However, his next fight against Armenian Arman Tsarukyan was even better. It was an incredibly close fight, with both fighters having significant moments where they almost finished the fight. In the third round, Charles came very close to stopping Arman, but the bell saved Tsarukyan, and Oliveira ultimately lost by split decision. His most recent fight was the very first 5-round fight in his 46-fight career, and he did very well against a rematch with Michael Chandler. This fight showed that Charles Oliveira had transitioned from a super aggressive fighter to a more patient one, like his former opponent Islam Makhachev. In the end, Oliveira dominated Chandler once again and won by unanimous decision. Do you think this new version of Oliveira will win the belt once again? Comment your thoughts below.